To mark the fall of Bashar al-Assad's rule, Syrians have flooded to the streets to celebrate what is being called a victory of the revolution. In Damascus, large crowds gathered at the iconic Umayyad Mosque as the new leadership promised a transition to an inclusive and non-sectarian government. Men, women and children flocked to the mosque, an unusual sight in Damascus, with some raising the Syrian independence flag used by the opposition since the 2011 uprising. Syria's new caretaker Prime Minister al-Bashir also arrived at Umayyad Mosque for Friday prayers. The fall of Assad has prompted many Syrian refugees to return home, while families desperately search for loved ones disappeared during his regime. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is touring the region to discuss stability post-Assad. During his visit to Turkey, Blinken stressed on the importance of preventing an ISIS resurgence in Syria and ensuring regional peace.
We're very focused on Syria, very focused on the opportunity that now is before us and before the Syrian people to move from out from under the shackles of Bashar al-Assad to a different and better future for the Syrian people, one that the Syrian people decide for themselves. And we talked about how Turkey, how the United States, how other partners in the region can support those efforts. And I think there's broad agreement on what we would each like to see going forward, starting with the interim government in Syria, one that is inclusive and non-sectarian, one that protects the rights of minorities and women, one that preserves institutions of the state and delivers services to the people, one that deals with any chemical weapons it may find to secure them and appropriately destroy them, one that rejects any alliances with extremist groups, and, of course, one that does not pose any kind of threat to any of Syria's neighbors. We also discussed the imperative of continuing the efforts to keep ISIS down. Our countries worked very hard and gave a lot over many years to ensure the elimination of the territorial caliphate of ISIS, to ensure that that threat doesn't rear its head again, and it's imperative that we keep at those efforts.
The G7 nations have pledged support for Syria's transitional government while calling for human rights protections and accountability for Assad's regime. Meanwhile, the global chemical weapons watchdog held an emergency meeting on Thursday to address Syria's toxic chemical stockpiles following Assad's overthrow. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons urged Syria to comply with safety and destruction rules after rebels took Damascus. For more on this, joining us on the broadcast is Arwa Damon, who is a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Rafik Hariri Center for the Middle East and president and founder of the International Network for Aid, Relief and Assistance, also a former CNN senior correspondent. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast. Let me begin by asking you for your assessment of what's playing out at this point in Syria.
Thank you. This is, it's beyond a historic moment. Look, I have covered Syria from the get-go, pretty much from day one when demonstrators first took to the streets asking for democracy and freedom. And of course, a lot. So much has changed since then. And it's well worth reminding everyone of what it is that Syrians lost, the price that they paid to be able to get to this point. 500,000 people are dead. Hundreds of thousands are searching for loved ones right now. There are estimates that upwards of 150,000 people disappeared into Syria's prison system since 2011. Millions have been internally displaced. Millions more have been forced outside. Nobody was expecting this moment. And despite the fact that there is a lot of doubt being cast on the intentions of this interim government and on Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the rebel group that led this offensive that brought down the government of Bashar al-Assad. It's also worth remembering that even as far back as 2012, we were hearing Syrians who made up the core of the revolution, remember, calls for democracy and freedom, remarking and realizing to a certain degree that they would need to have a revolution after the revolution. And look, no one is under any illusion that this is going to be easy. This entire process could be derailed at any point in time. But up until this moment, at the very least, HTS, the ruling interim government, is saying the right things, is taking the right actions. But as much as Syrians want to do this on their own without outside interference, they are going to need support, especially in the judicial and in the humanitarian sectors.
Right. What can you share with us regarding this entire concern about Syria's chemical weapons stockpile and the race to find those chemical weapons?
Well, I don't really know if it's a race per se, in as much as, Syria never fully destroyed its chemical weaponry. And actually, we did hear statements coming from the interim government calling on international experts to come to Syria to help them secure these chemical stockpiles. So that, at the very least, is a positive development. What is not necessarily helping Syria at this stage, especially when it comes to Syria's own stability, are these countless hundreds of strikes that we're seeing being carried out by Israel, ostensibly for Israel's own security, but very much seemingly targeted at a number of Syrian regime military sites, other military facilities, weaponry that used to belong to the Syrian military. And at this point in time, in the list of things that Syrians themselves are concerned about, they realize that there are international entities out there that can help them with the chemical stockpiles. Experts just need to start going into the country and actually providing the assistance that Syrians themselves are asking for, versus offering up assistance that Syrians are saying they don't necessarily want or need at this stage.
All right, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for joining us in the broadcast. To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.